Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here just in a minute. We are still letting people in from the waiting room. So if you can just give us just a little bit more time, we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to our second bite-sized EL Summer Learning. Appreciate all of you coming this morning to spend an hour with me. You will need some paper and something to write with this morning. We're going to do a little activity, even if it's just a sticky note, just something to write with. Also, make sure that your full name is displayed. This is how we check attendance and also let you into the from the waiting room. And the session is being recorded, and we will be uploading this to our YouTube channel. We will use the chat box for communication. Since we're not face-to-face, we'll use that tool. So good morning to everyone that is typing in the chat box. And also be prepared to engage in polls. I will project some of the Zoom polls that we're going to do, again, just to interact with each other. So be prepared to do that, and then just be prepared to respond in the chat box. It's, kind of hard if you've been doing remote learning, it's a little, or remote teaching, it's a little strange to be talking to your computer screen. So even though I don't have all of your pretty faces pulled up because it will distract me and cover my screen, I like seeing everybody using the chat box. So good morning to everybody, and thanks for joining me. Especially to those of you that have attended other sessions, thanks for coming back. And I have my earpods in today, so if it looks kind of strange, and hopefully they will hold up. So thank you for all of your patience and understanding, because we know how communication goes. Today, or this short period of time this morning, if you want to share your learning, you can tag me or our bilingual ESL Twitter handle. I also run that one. So again, thanks everybody. So welcome to Language Acquisition, Instruction, and Advocacy for our English learners. This is a bite-sized version, just a very quick hour together. So I hope that you can take away a few things. This is me in a nutshell. I've just finished 22 years in education, mainly, actually all has been with ESL and bilingual. I've also taught adult ESL classes, and I've kind of done a little bit of everything: classroom specialist, district level coordinator, and then at the service center, I've been an instructional content coach, and then now I'm the ESSA team lead. And ESSA stands for Every Student Succeeds Act, and that includes bilingual ESL. So this is me in a nutshell. I wish that we were face-to-face so I could kind of get to know who my audience is. You're welcome to use the chat box if you want to just comment, either what district you're coming from or what you teach. I'd love to see that, so feel free to do that. Our objectives for this morning, we're going to look at what's the role of BICS and CALC in the classroom. We're going to look at strategies to target academic language needs during instruction and gain tools to support with advocacy. So really looking at, what are BICS and CALC if you're not familiar, and what are some strategies to help you with instruction, and then how can you advocate for your students? And great, I see a lot of people in the chat box saying where they're from or what they're doing. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to start off with the why. Why would we talk about instruction, language acquisition, advocacy, all of that? And these two gentlemen are students that in my previous district were enrolled. They came to us in, 7th grade, and they were both refugees from Burma. And both of these young men, they survived on a boat with no food and water for 21 days. And if you have attended my refugee session, or you plan to attend my refugee session, you will see interviews with both of these young men sharing their story. And the reason I share their pictures, these are their graduation pictures, And so this is Muhammad in the blue and Noor in the nice tie. And both of these students persevered so much, and yet they succeeded and graduated. And they would not have been able to do this without the support and advocacy of their ESL teachers and their classroom teachers. So this is why I do what I do. This is why I think it's important to have the sessions that are about advocating and helping teachers understand it's for students like this. So we're going to start off with thinking about how confident are you with understanding language acquisition, instructing English learners, and advocating for English learners. I was fortunate enough that when I did my undergraduate studies, I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I wanted to be an ESL teacher, and this was back in the late 90s. And I was fortunate enough to take courses on language acquisition. And so it really helped shape me as a teacher. So we're going to look at how confident are you, and I'm going to project a poll. And you should be able to see the poll now. So just kind of let's see, let's pre-assess ourselves. How confident are you in understanding second language acquisition? You're not confident yet, somewhat, or confident, or you're maybe at the expert level. Do you understand instructional approaches for ELs? Yes, but maybe still need some support, or yes, I've got it, or not yet. And then how comfortable are you with advocating for English learners, both inside and outside the classroom? And what I mean by that is not just instructionally, but helping them, you know, with being involved in extracurricular activities, or even in maybe if those students are also being served in other areas such as an art or 504 or GT. About half of us have voted so far. And this is pre-assessing with some type of feedback tool, whether in the classroom you are doing it, if you're doing a virtual classroom, in Zoom, you could do it this way if you use Zoom, or there are lots of other ways. Mentimeter is another one that I like to use. But whenever I pre-assess, then I can kind of gauge my audience, and I know where we're at, and I know where I need to take that conversation. So it looks like majority of us are somewhat confident to confident as far as understanding what language acquisition is. And then instructional approaches, it looks like most of us still need some support, and that's okay. We're going to continue to grow. And also, how comfortable are you with advocating? It looks like most of us are comfortable, but still need some support in that. All right, so thank you. I don't have everybody that's voted yet, but I'm going to go ahead and stop there. If for some reason you're having issues with voting, you're welcome to use the chat box. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end that. Thank you for participating. All right, so I want you to think about this. Would all students be considered English proficient? And when we're thinking about, you know, all the students that you have in your classroom, let's say I came to your school and we are going to give all of your class periods or your classrooms the language assessment. Do you think all students would be considered English proficient? So what I want you to do in this one is I want you to use, since we're not together, I want you to use the chat box and just respond, you know, yes, no, and you're welcome to even add, you know, clarification if you want. Let's see where we all, lots of no's. Wow, yeah, so it looks like most of us say no, all of our students would not be considered English proficient. And when we do administer that test, it's not just a social language test. It does have, you know, academic language in there. And so a lot of our students would be considered, you know, limited English proficient. They would actually, you know, potentially be served in the program. Okay, so something to think about, because we have students that are coming from all types of backgrounds, and their parents are at different proficiency levels, so what they're hearing at home is different. So not everyone would be considered proficient. So now we're going to do, we're going to use our paper and pencil or pen, and we're going to take a test. We're going to see, are you English proficient? Okay, so I'm going to give you a moment if you just want to grab a sticky note or a piece of paper or something to write on. When you get that piece of paper, I want you just to number it to 5. Okay, so number to 5. And these are going to be just one-word responses. Okay, so are you ready to take our test? All right. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and on your piece of paper, I want you to name, well, you may just got some of those answers because I clicked. I want you to name these items, okay? So on your piece of paper, hopefully you didn't see what I did me clicking, sorry about that. I want you to name these 5 items.
We can't hear you, Melanie.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I was talking and you couldn't hear me. Someone asked in the chat box, how do you insert a timer into a slide? And what I do is I just go to YouTube and I find one that I want, and I copy and paste that URL, and I copy it, and then I go into my slide deck, whether you're using PowerPoint or Google Slides, and you do insert video, and you copy and paste that hyperlink in, and there you go. There's your timer. Oh, test them out before though, because they might make some bad sounds. Okay, so that was our 2-minute timer, and we're going to check our work and see, are you English proficient? So what I'm going to do is when I go to the next slide, it will have all the answers, which some of you already got a peek at. And in the chat box, what I want you to do is to tell me how many you got out of the 5. So if it's 0 out of 5, 1 out of 5, so forth, and let's just see, you know, how much you know. So how many did you get correct? Here are the answers. These words are part of the vernacular of Central Canada. I like to use these because most often people, you know, don't know what they are. And even myself, you know, I didn't know all of these either because we call them different things. But all of us speak English, right? And all of us would say we're English proficient. So it looks like a lot of you didn't see my oops slide. It looks like most of us maybe got 0, or you got 1, or maybe 2. Somebody got 3. That's impressive. The person that got, let me just say this, the people that got 2 or 3, if you got, you know, more than that, how do you know these words? So if you got 2 or more, how did you know what these items were? Feel free to just use the chat box. Okay, so someone in our audience says their grandmother called these items by these names. Angela or Angelia, was your grandmother from Canada? These words were used from parents, okay? From Oklahoma. Interesting. Wow. That's very interesting. So as you can see, you know, these different items, it depends on maybe, you know, family, what maybe your family members. So this, some of our participants are saying their parents or their grandparents use these words. So then now you know them, right? Okay. Some are saying I knew this because of reading. So it's just something to think about when we think about English proficiency. I've tested over the years many students that have come from around the world, and an item that we call something, you know, we use a certain word in their country, they don't use that term. And it's not even another language, it's in English, but they don't use that term. But because they don't use that term, the same term as us, then it's wrong. So it's very interesting to me, you know, just these different perspectives. And so something I want you to think about is what's good for all is necessary for some. So today, you know, you're going to hear things, and you will hear also a lot of people say ESL strategies are good for everyone. You know, they're good for all my students, and they are. And as we see here, you know, we, just like you guys said, not all of my students would be English proficient, right? And we looked at these words, and we're all English proficient people, adults, yet we didn't know those. And would we be considered not English proficient because we didn't know them? So we just have to really keep in mind that all the things that we do for ESL students and those techniques, yes, they are good for all, but they're absolutely necessary for some. So while they're going to be good for your whole class, and the approaches that we take are going to, umbrella, so to speak, protect everyone, with our ESL students, it's absolutely necessary that we do that so they're successful. So do teachers and students speak the same classroom language? So when you're thinking about, you know, your students sitting in front of you, and whether you're in a self-contained or you're a secondary teacher and you have several class periods, are you speaking, you know, the same language as the students? Are they understanding that? We're going to use these sentence stems. The teacher speaks blank, and the student knows blank. And we're going to use our chat box again. So since we're not together, in the chat box, I want you to use these sentence stems. Okay, and if we were together, we would, you know, be probably turning and talking and doing something, but since we're not, we're going to do this to the chat. So the teacher speaks what, and the student knows what, when we're thinking about the classroom language that goes on, you know, during instruction. So just be using the chat box and use the sentence stems to complete these two sentences. The teacher speaks and the student knows. So a lot of our responses, the teacher speaks academic language. The student knows conversational language or social language. We have some people here today with us that do know what BICS and CALP are. That's great. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. So this is very hard because in our classrooms, we are, you know, there to facilitate the learning, and we're there to guide that instruction. But our students, you know, that's not their normal everyday language, right? So we don't come home, and probably with you, if you do have children or family, when you come home, you're not speaking an academic language, right? So my husband is also is a high school teacher, and then you have me and our 3 kids, and although we do our best to, we never water down language, we're not speaking, you know, in those academic terms all day. So when we're in the classroom, it's very hard because your students are really, they know conversational, they know social, but they're not really engaged in academic. So this is where it's an opportunity for you to put in place structured conversation opportunities. And what I mean by structured conversation is very scripted, step by step. And today we only have an hour together and I've got to watch my time. But I would encourage you to come to some other sessions where we'll practice that, particularly face-to-face, but we will attempt to practice that in Zoom. But really having, you know, when I say go, you will have 30 seconds to use this sentence stem with your partner and really putting that academic language in the hands of the kids where they're using it, not just hearing you say it, but they're actually using it and writing it. So a lot of different things here, textbook language. Also, we have to consider, like someone has put in here, you know, math vocabulary. If you teach a content where it's very, well, just another content, let's say it's not language arts, math, science, social studies, you're speaking that language. And so then that's a whole nother, I could go on a whole nother session on that too, because those of us all of us are educated, yet if we were sitting in a particular content classroom, we might struggle because we don't know the academic language of that content. So then therefore we could be limited in English at that point. So there's so many different factors in this. And also, oh, go back. We also know that our students use a lot of slang, and sometimes we don't understand what that is. So just something to think about when you are standing in front of the classroom, really trying to the ones doing the talking are the ones doing the learning. So really you transferring what you want them to know about the academic terms and the concepts and putting it in their hands and allowing them to practice using it. All right, so now we're going to look at BICS and CALP, okay? So what I'm going to do is I want you to tell me in the chat box, oh wait, I think actually I have a Zoom poll, so no chat box in this one. Which of these pictures, so we've got one picture where a teacher is in front of the classroom teaching, and then we have this other picture where these young men are sitting and maybe they're on their phones or they're talking. So which picture is BICS and which picture is CALP? So BICS is your basic interpersonal communication skills, and CALP is your cognitive academic language proficiency. So I'm going to project my poll, and let's see here. All right, so which setting is BICS and which setting is CALP? So you may notice, or I want you to notice, that we had a conversation first that led us into the BICS and the CALP before I'm now kind of asking, hey, what is it? So something to think about in your classroom is allowing that whole group time, and then maybe even, you know, letting them talk with a partner, and then now maybe you're going to do it independently. So it looks like most of us do agree that BICS, I can show you real quick. So it looks like most of us, you do agree that BICS is number 2. That's your basic skills, basic interpersonal communication skills. So that those students, that's what we call, actually I can show you, we call that the playground language. And so it's students, you know, on the playground or in social settings. Also, we have to consider that with technology, that has even changed even more. So now students on their phones, they're using terms and acronyms that most of us don't understand. So that's even shifted a little bit. And then our CALP is our picture 1, which is in the classroom. That is where our cognitive academic language proficiency is happening. And that's our classroom language, our academic language. So you'll hear the terms CALP is academic language, BICS is your social language. All right, some of you did it in the chat box. Thank you. Thanks for participating. All right. So when we think about learning and we think about schooling, how is everyday language different from academic language? We learn everyday language through experiences. So at home, before we go to school as a child, we're learning that everyday language, and that everyday language for many of us will be in English or was in English. But for some of us and some of our students, their everyday language is not in English. And so their everyday language is whatever language is spoken at home. And that's okay. And that's good, because the stronger the first language, the stronger your second language. So we want to encourage them to continue building that. But our ELs, when they come to us, they're learning both at the same time. So when you have a student that has come to you, especially in the upper grades, because the content is more dense and heavy, our students are learning that social, but they're trying to learn the academic at the same time. So when we look at social language, our BICS, we're looking at 1 to 3 years, and that's give or take. That there's so many factors. There are factors with personality. There are factors with culture. Do they have a disability? So many different things. But social, you're looking at 1 to 3 years, and that's when children learn to communicate. So think about this: our kids don't go to school until age 5, and that there's a reason for that, right? I mean, some may go at 3 or 4, depending on pre-K, but in general, students start school at age 5, and they've had that opportunity to build that social language at home. And so now they come to school. So you can see the academic or the TALP, that's when students enter school to begin acquiring academic skills, okay? And that's 4 to 7 years. So if you have, let's say, a 6th grader that enrolls, and their first language, is another language, they are at the same time trying to get the social and the academic all at the same time. And so we're looking at 1 to 3 years. And again, that's give or take. It varies. But then your academic, again, it varies as well, but 4 to 7 years. So if you're a 6th grader, let's say it takes them 4 years, we're looking at 10th grade is when we would say theoretically that they would have their academic language. But you and I both know that our students, we don't always have, we're still learning academic language. Why do we continue to teach English language arts all the way through high school and college? Why do we continue to teach all the contents we do? So we're always still acquiring that academic language. So have you ever thought this, or have you ever been told this? Blank doesn't need ESL. They speak just fine. Okay, use the chat box. Have you ever been told that before? Or have you ever even thought that? Have you thought that? I'm not sure why the students in ESL, they speak just fine. Or, maybe you are a specialist or an ESL teacher, and you've had other people say that. I can tell you in my experience as both an ESL specialist and working at the district level for 8 years, had many conversations about this. And what tends to happen is teachers will be surprised when it's time for state assessments or benchmarks and students are not successful. And they're wondering, but I don't understand, they speak just fine. So this tends to be, it looks like a lot of you have experienced that same thing. And what also tends to happen is at the younger grade levels, or let's just say elementary, students are able to get by, and we don't really notice. And then when they get to secondary, that's when it really becomes evident. Oh, they do not have their academic language yet. That's what's going on. And I think probably most of you would agree that most of the struggle on STAR is that students don't know the academic vocabulary. That tends to be what happens. Would you guys agree with that? The students that are not successful in STAR, it's because they lack academic language. And I'm going to show you a resource that you may already be aware of that will would be, I think, a great place to go to. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Yeah, so vocabulary is a big issue. All right. Now what we're going to do is we are going to watch a video, and we're going to determine whether the student you're watching just has her BICS or has both her BICS and CALP. Okay, so here in just a second, I'm going to minimize my screen right here, and I'm going to go to a video, and this is another great resource that I'm sharing with you to share with your colleagues or to go look further in depth. But I'm going to show you this video, and while you're watching it, there will actually be two kind of episodes of it. And when we watch the first video, I want you to be really thinking about, you know, wow, what does this student just have her BICS or does she have both? And then we'll watch the second video, and I want you to determine what you think, okay? So I'm going to minimize real quickly. And I think I'm gonna have to take out my AirPods. I'll go back. Because last time, I don't think it allowed me to. So let me try this real quick. Lauren, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I think we're going good now. So Lauren, I failed to introduce my assistant. Lauren is with me here today helping. All right, so we're going to start the video, and if you do not hear it, Lauren is going to alert me.
Where are you from?
Honduras, where are you from?
I'm from California. How long have you lived here?
2 years.
Yeah.
And you?
I've lived here for 4 years, almost 4 years. Yeah. You like it here?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you like about it?
People are nice, and I have a lot of friends here. I especially like the food in here.
Oh yeah? What kind of food?
Hamburgers and pizza.
Oh, pizza. I like pizza too. What kind of food do you eat in Honduras?
We eat a lot of food, but mostly I like the eggs and the beans and the cheese.
Oh, do you eat that food here too?
Yeah, since my mom makes them.
Oh, what's your favorite food that your mom makes?
Spaghetti.
Oh yeah, I love spaghetti. Do you like to cook? Do you help your mom in the kitchen?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you do when you help her?
I just sometimes she goes to the store with me and buys some of the things that she's gonna do for the food.
Oh, so you help her with the groceries?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, so we're going to stop there, and in the chat box, just watching that piece, what do you think? Do you think the student has just BICS? Do you think the student has BICS and CALP, or you're not sure yet? So just use the chat box, and what do you think? So it looks like most of us think BICS. Okay, so we're going to watch the next part where she's going to get into the content, and let's see what the student has. I would tell you that in my experiences, often hearing a student like her, that's what would lead teachers to believe, oh, you know, this student, she's good, like she doesn't need any other support. Because often as teachers, we have a classroom of, 20 plus kids, or if you're at secondary, you're seeing, 30 kids in each class period. And so you don't get the opportunity to sit down like this and talk to a student. And so you might not really ever know. And that's why it's so important for us to do activities in the classroom where students are speaking and interacting, where you can kind of float around the room and listen. All right, we're going to listen to the next part.
Okay, we've been learning about where plants get their energy from. So how are the roots important to a plant?
The roots of a plant takes in the water of the plant. They help the plants grow more if they're from the sun.
Okay, and how are stems important to a plant?
they're pointing to a plant, so they can get sun, water, and some other things.
Okay, and how do the green leaves of the plant make sugar?
When the water falls into the leaves, in the in the when the water falls into the leaves in the leaf.
Okay. So now what do you think?
Where are you from?
Honduras,
hold on. So now what do you think? Does this student have both, or does she just simply have Bix? Okay, so in the chat box, let me know, what do you think? Now that you've got to watch the lesson, does she just have her Bix, or does she have CALP as well? Yeah, so most of you are agreeing that she does have Bix. She may have a little bit of her academic language, the CALP, but still needs some more support. And maybe that the CALP, someone has mentioned, you know, basic memorized academic language. So she's heard her teacher, maybe she's seen an anchor chart, or she remembers a lesson, and so she might be repeating that, but does she really know, you know, what it is? And again, just to reiterate, is that's why it's very important to incorporate those opportunities for speaking and writing, that the reproductive part, producing the language, giving them the academic language, but making them actually use it, not just hearing you say it. And in the chat box, just kind of let me know, because I don't know exactly where all of you are coming from in your settings. Some of you may be specialists, some of you elementary or secondary, where you're seeing, you know, hundreds of kids a day. How many of you actually feel like you get a good opportunity to sit down and really know students like this? So where you could identify, this student needs more support. How many of you do have that opportunity? Because it's hard, you know, it's hard to do. It's very difficult, yeah, in secondary, where you're seeing kids, you know, your class periods. And I taught, my last teaching assignment was middle school, and it's hard to do that. And when you are talking to them, it's very social, like, hey, how are you doing? Good morning. Where's your homework? It's not, we're, you know, really getting that opportunity to sit down and talk. And so then you might be surprised when that student's not successful, because you think, oh, wow, I would have never known. And by incorporating these opportunities for speaking and the structured, what I'm talking about is structured conversations. You can Google it, and I can even send you guys in the follow-up email, I can send you some resources. You can do it in secondary. It definitely can be done at all grade levels, but when you do those activities, then you can walk around the room and you can listen. And that's where you kind of start cluing in of, oh, okay, you know, somebody doesn't have it, or oh, wow, that student really understands. Let's let that student teach somebody else. So those are great opportunities. And some of you are from small districts where you have that opportunity, and that's nice too. Okay. All right, so our student, we said, yes, she has her Bix, but no, she's really not there yet in CALP. The student does have Bix. She can participate in social conversations on familiar topics with her teacher. She can ask and answer questions with her teacher, and she can make herself understood by using consistent standard English grammatical forms, okay? CALP, she's not able to provide complete information about grade level content previously presented. And the example given is how green leaves make sugar. She's unable to recall the content-related vocabulary that she has been taught, and she's unable to demonstrate at an advanced level of language development. So we can see that she does have one and not the other. Please remember though, just like in TELPAS, and if you're a new teacher and you haven't experienced that yet, or you've never experienced it, the levels are beginner, intermediate, advanced, advanced, high. And just like with Bix and CALP 2, think about they're all within there's a range. So in beginner, there's a range. I'm really, really beginner, but I'm almost intermediate, or I'm in between, and then all the way up. So even your advanced high students still need support. They may be near native, but they still need that support. And depending on where they're at in that range, are they at the beginning, or are they at the end? It's the same with BICS and CALC. Your students are all going to be, they're kind of going to, be float between different ranges. So something to consider. So now we're going to take a look at some strategies. And before I put these 2 slides on, just know that these strategies are not an exhaustive list. And I firmly believe that it does no good to water hose participants or students with information, because our brain only takes in so much information and the other just goes out the other side of your ears, basically, so to speak. So just very bite-sized things. So we're going to take a look at some of those strategies, and then it looks like we may even have time for me to go to the site. I can show you that has some of these resources, and you may already be aware of them. But here are some strategies to use and pass on. That's the thing about what you're not, what we're only better together. And so if you have the knowledge and please pass on to your colleagues. But so a big thing with our English learners is particularly our beginners, is to really come to terms with the fact that all of the TEKS, all of the things that we are required to teach and whatever content we teach, they're not going to be able to get all of that. And so you really have got to allow yourself and give yourself grace and look at what are the big ideas. So I have this unit I'm teaching in science, and it's, maybe it's U.S. history. So it's our 10th or 11th graders U.S. history, and I've got this unit to teach, but I have a beginner EL. And we're not going to be able to do all this. So really looking at what are the big ideas and the must-haves. So whatever you teach, really looking at through the lens for your ELs, particularly your beginner, intermediate, newcomer ELs, what are the big ideas of this unit? What are the things they must have to be successful in that next grade level? And even then, sometimes we can't cover it all. So really looking at that overarching big idea of whatever the unit or the TEK is in the scope and sequence. Also, introducing and reinforcing, front-loading new concepts and vocabulary is very helpful. Some people I know do that flipped classroom approach. It's extremely helpful because now I've been introduced to these, the vocabulary and the concepts, and now when I move in to actually sit down for the lesson, I've heard those words at least, or I've seen them. If you're a specialist, I would highly encourage you to reach out to teachers once we go back and just say, hey, what are you teaching next week or this month? And you start front loading. When I was an ESL specialist, that's what I would do at the elementary level, is I would reach out to the teachers and just say, hey, what are you teaching? I want to front load the vocabulary. And that's what I would do. Using visuals, gestures, translation if possible, or synonyms to convey meaning. Google Translate, it's great, and it can be bad. Word to word is safe, but try not to, put in a whole novel, because it will not translate accurately. Some languages don't even have a written language. I had some students that their language, you could even buy a dictionary or find translation because they didn't have a written language. But if you're able to, it's always helpful to find that translation or synonyms to convey. Having students draw it, act it out. Of course, if you're a secondary, that might be a little awkward, but your elementary kids, having them act out or use in a sentence, and ask what the word is in their language. Even at secondary, when we came across vocabulary, I would ask students, so tell me, what is that word in, Punjabi? And their eyes would light up like, oh, wow, you really want to know? Yeah, I want to know. When you do that too, it helps make a connection in the brain. So I speak Spanish. My Spanish is really rusty now that I've been at the service center because I don't have anybody to talk to. But I would often, go, okay, so what is it in Spanish, what is it in English? And it's like, your brain makes that connection. So it's very helpful. Building background knowledge. Again, mentioning that flipped classroom approach. If you make videos or front load some of that information ahead of time. Showing the words with a visual or a video. If any of you at your elementary grade levels use Brain Pop, it's free right now. I don't know if it's still free because of the pandemic, but I loved using that because I could stop and talk about the vocabulary. Also, enunciate slowly and clearly. One of the biggest things with us as teachers is many of us, we speak fast, or sometimes we just, we're trying to get through things so we don't speak clearly. And when you're an English learner, it really hangs you up because they're hanging on to every word you say. And when they can't understand you, then they either just give up or they learn it incorrectly. So really think about when you are introducing vocabulary that you are very, that you enunciate the words and that you speak clearly. And I'll tell you that when I was doing ESL, probably was from one of probably the longest period of time that I was really so fixated on, okay, I've got to speak clearly and enunciate. And I'm from West Texas, and so I didn't want to have that West Texas twang. I wanted to my kids to really, learn the words correctly. So thinking about that. Also having students, as I keep mentioning, practicing using those words in structured conversations, putting them in sentence stems or paragraph frames and having them practice. Also adding a word wall or an anchor chart. Word walls and anchor charts are not just elementary. I've seen some great word walls and anchor charts in secondary. I coached in U.S. history for 6 weeks. Well, actually I've done it several times whenever I was an instructional content coach for the Service Center, and there were some amazing word walls that were up in the classrooms for U.S. history and world history. So it can be done, and it's just great because it's a reference. And I'm going to look at the chat box because I see some people are also commenting, and I want to make note of that. So some of you said, in a pinch, Google Translate's great, and then some their language isn't there. Making GIFs with hand gestures or kinesthetic movements when front-loading vocabulary. Yeah, GIFs are great because now we have that as well. And, realia is when you actually have the object and showing them. And that's great. Then when I started teaching back in the late 90s, we didn't have, I think I barely had email. So now we have so many things at our fingertips that we can help students with. This that I have on the screen with the little scan me is Lead Forward. And I'm not sure if we're going to have time to go there. You may be familiar with Lead Forward. Here's what I like about Lead Forward. Beyond they've got some great interactive activities that are already done for you. You can literally print them down and it gives you the activities and everything you need. But also what I like about it is I can go to my content, my grade level, and I like to look at the academic vocabulary. And I like to see what are the most common words that are seen in the STAR, whatever. And I take those, and those are words that I like to focus on or try to focus on. Are we going to get all of them? Maybe not. And as a classroom as a whole, yes, you will get to all of them. But when we're talking about our EL, we have to still be thinking about, okay, maybe as a class, I'm planning for all of this, but for my EL in particular, I need to be cognizant of the vocabulary words. I need to really make sure that I hit on. So great resource, love Lead Forward if you're not familiar with it. I will send it in the follow-up email, the link, or you can scan this QR code right here, and it hopefully worked. It'll take you there, but great resource. Yes, and someone mentioned the sentence stems with cognates. There's so much there. Just really, really encourage you to check it out. Oh, yay, thank you. The QR code does work. Awesome. You never know. Sometimes technology, hangs you up. All right, some other strategies. Word map or Frere model. This is a very common ESL technique that you'll find, and that allows for visual representation, a student-friendly definition, and synonyms and antonyms. So you can see here in the little image I've included there. Non-examples are also really good to include. What are some examples of the word, but what are some non-examples? We have a lot of words that mean multiple things, and that really hangs us up in English. So that's one great thing to use. Also concept maps or graphic organizers. I'm a thinking maps trainer and used thinking maps for years. the campus that I was at when I was a specialist, we were actually a pilot for thinking maps, and I absolutely love them for ELs because, as I mentioned earlier, our brain takes in information in chunks, and so your brain naturally is doing this. So using some type of concept map is only natural and is very helpful. And I've included a circle map over here. And again, this is basic. I know if you teach, secondary, this is very elementary, but just as an image to see. But giving that visual representation, allowing students, maybe I don't have the language, but I can draw. Adding new vocabulary, display on a wall to create a concept word wall. So what I mean by that is whenever I was on a campus and we used thinking maps, instead of having a word wall, I had a concept word wall. And so what I did is whatever I was teaching, it was kind of like my little anchor chart, and we would focus on the concept and the academic vocabulary. But then after I was done with that, I would have, add some visuals, or I might have some of my kids add visuals, and then I put it on the wall. And so then when we wanted to go back and we were talking about a particular concept, I could say, oh, remember when we studied that? That's right up there on the word wall. Or how do I spell this, Mrs. Yoakum? Well, remember that's one of our academic words from this concept, and they would go and look there. So I did, instead of a word wall where it's A through Z, I did the concept word. And for me, it worked, and it worked for my students. Also, make introducing new vocabulary memorable. Use a cartoon or a funny story. And there's another resource, I can't think of the name of it. I can see the book that I used at middle school that could be used at all the way through high school. And maybe you might be able to use it with fifth grade as well. But it's vocabulary cartoons or cartoon vocabulary. I can't remember, but all the vocabulary has this funny, cartoon with it, and the kids would remember. They would remember these very high academic words. So make it memorable. Also, think about translating from social to academic and back. And what I mean by that is, let's say we're talking about, an academic word. We'll try to find something to relate it that is more social so they can make that connection and then back. So, I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but just, think about a very academic word and how could you translate that into more social language and then take them back to the academic. Okay, but this is what it might be here, but this is what it is. Also providing sentence stems and paragraph frames in your classroom, regardless of what you teach. And think about what stems could I maybe put on an anchor chart that when we respond in the classroom, that's what we use. If you attend my language-rich classrooms, there's going to be a bite-sized one this summer. I think it's in July. In that session, or at least in the face-to-face, we talk a lot about the expectation in your classroom is that they speak in complete sentences. There's no one answer responses. And that's from Seidlitz. He has the Language Rich Classrooms book. And that can make a huge difference, making an anchor chart that says, speak in complete sentences. And that's the only thing that's the expectation. That's the only thing you will accept in your classroom. So just thinking about that. Also, something I want to make note of is a script, or what I say by exemplar, is I don't know about you guys, but whenever I've changed jobs, which not very many times. I've been in the same place for a long time, same places for a long time. But I will ask a colleague, like, hey, can I see your resume? So I can kind of use it as a model. Also, I like to, when I have to send emails. So for example, when I was at the district level, I'd have to send emails to principals and assistant superintendents. And it made me a little nervous, am I going to say the right thing? So I would ask a colleague, like, hey, do you have any examples? And I would use theirs and plug in my information until I became comfortable where I could do it myself. So I share those two examples with you because with all students, but in particular our EL students, we can't expect them to give you a response or a paper or whatever it is you're expecting them to do. You can't expect them to give maybe them everything that you're wanting without ever showing them an exemplar or giving them a frame to practice, and then eventually they can move on their own. And some people will say, oh, well, that's scripted writing, and we don't do prescriptive writing. But I will tell you, if you never practice what it should look like, you're never going to get what it should look like. And so we have to give that to them. All right, so Moving on, how can I advocate? We're winding down. I've only got 5 minutes. But how can I advocate? Know the stories of your students. Know the stories. That's a big one. You know, as I mentioned, I had these two students that came to the district. I was at the district level, but these were refugee students. And they had just gotten off of a boat where they'd had no food or water for 21 days or 22 days. I can't remember the exact number. But as a teacher, if I didn't know that, and I'm thinking, why don't they ever do this? Why don't they ever do that? Maybe once I knew the story, I might understand a little more. So know your stories of your students and share your stories. You know, we all have a story to tell too, and it makes us seem more human to them when we share our own. Also consider second language acquisition when you're planning and teaching. I know you're planning for your whole class, and you may have, you know, 7 periods a day of 20 to 30 kids in there, and that's hard. But just remember, as we said, these approaches are good for everyone, but they're necessary for some, which is our English learners and some of our students that also have other learning disabilities. Know the proficiency level of your students. If you don't know, go and ask. If you have a specialist, an ESL specialist on your campus or your district, go ask them. Ask your AP. I want to see their TELPAS scores, whatever it is, but know what their levels are. Also encourage extracurricular activities outside of the classroom. Encourage them to go and get involved in sports or in band or art or music, whatever it may be. Really, you may be that only person who has taken that interest in them, and you, one person, you know, can make that difference. Also, share your knowledge with colleagues, things that you know and the approaches that you've done in your classroom. Teachers are more likely to do these things if you tell them than me, because you're experiencing it, right? I mean, I was in the classroom, experienced it, but now I'm doing this. They're more likely probably to do it if you've tried it out and you say, yeah, no, it works, do it. Also, what I would encourage you, or what I would say to you, is give it time. Don't try something one day, 1 week, or even a couple of weeks and go, I scratched that, it doesn't work. Give it time. You've got to train your kids on doing particular things. So make sure that you give it time and to see. And then if it doesn't work, or it doesn't work for a particular class period, then, you know, you abandon it and move on. Because we all know that some of our class periods, they can't handle doing certain things, and we have to make adjustments. Also, speak up. When you go to meetings, whether it's a campus meeting, it's your team meeting, a district meeting, or you're sitting in the LPAC, that's the Language Proficiency Assessment Committee, where we make those decisions for ELs, or it's in an RTI, 504 ART, etc. Speak up. Advocate for your student. Too many times I've sat in these meetings, and I think that's probably where I got my thick skin, is I was like, no, this is not right. We have to do this for our ELs. So I would encourage you to speak up. And I love this quote, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And so I would encourage you to really hold on to that. You know, we're all doing the best we can. But now that, you know better, or you're still learning to do better, please do that. And I wanted to share this image. Just yesterday, this artist gave me permission to share this. And so I'm going to start putting this in my sessions of All Together now. This is a Georgia artist by the name of Ed Hose, and it's a she. And she made this actually several years ago, but just want you to know you can make a difference. And we all together, we can make a difference. So just want to leave you with that. I'm going to send you the link to the English Learner resources. I know we're running out of time. I'll send you a link to this. You can share it. You can use it. Has lots of things there for you. So you'll be able to go there and find resources, and it continually grows. We also have some sessions coming up. The next one I have coming up, I think, is the 18th. Yes, so on the 18th, I have I'm ESL certified Now What? That is actually a 2-hour session. So if you're interested in that, please join me. And then it looks like we still have some June 23rd, I have another bite-sized. And in July, I have 2 more bite-sized sessions. So feel free to join me. And then finally, we're going to do another poll. And this is really just how impactful. This is kind of a metric for me and for the Service Center to kind of know of this bite-sized session that you had today, was it beneficial to you? did you get what you needed out of it? And, you know, I wish we were together. It's hard doing it this way, and it's hard doing it in just an hour, but I'll tell you, I particularly have enjoyed attending a lot of the Sidelets webinars and Saddleback. There's lots of free webinars out there. I've enjoyed attending those, and I like them because they're 30 minutes to an hour, and it's just enough, because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I attend PD now, and when I did, just like you at the service center, I usually only walked away with a couple of things, because if you've been doing it as long as I have, you know, you've been doing those things, which is great affirmation. But just if you just respond and let me know now that you've attended, you know, what are your thoughts? Was today's learning impactful? About half of us are voted. Thank you so much. Also, you will receive an email from the service center. So just to kind of give you an idea, this is not immediate credit. What will happen is we'll generate the report from Zoom on who all attended, and our assistant will go in and award credit. But please know our assistants have lots of different consultants, and so it's not like an immediate turnaround, but eventually you'll get an email from the service center asking you to complete their survey. And feel free to make comments of how I can make improvements. This is the first time I've actually delivered this way. So, you know, I already know now some things I want to tweak, or email me, or in the chat box, let me know. I'm happy, because I want to grow and I do want to make this better. I'm going to keep the poll open, and then I'm going to go to the next screen, okay? Because we still have a few people that are voting. So this is our new logo. I'm very excited about this. I just had this created to represent our department, English Learner Support, or Bilingual ESL. Follow us. I now have a Facebook page. It's the English ESC Region 11 English Learner Support. We are also on Twitter, and we have YouTube. And on YouTube, I have several playlists for teachers, PD, books in other languages, and that's all these, you know, that resource is just really a living document and will continue to grow. So please follow us there and continue to vote. I see a few people are still voting. And finally, here's my contact information. You're welcome to email me if you have any questions or you have any feedback. Also, I've given you, and I'll send all this in the email, but I've given you the QR code to our Region 11 site. On that page, it has both compliance and instruction, and that's another document that I'm continuing to clean up and expand on. And then also, if you are not a part of my Succeeding in a Diverse Classroom s'more, you are welcome to join that. You can follow that QR, and I'll send it in the email as well, and you can follow that, or you're welcome to email me, and you can become a part of my email group where you will get it in your email inbox every month. And that's a monthly s'more. I don't blog. It's simply, here's some instructional resources, and here's a cool technology resource. And so I'd encourage you, to be a part of that. And it's all level. It's not just a particular level, and it's not just particular to ELs. All right, so I'm going to keep the poll up because a few of us are still voting, but I'm going to mute myself. And if you would like to make any comments in the chat box, I'm sorry we ran over. We are done. So thank you again for joining me, and I hope that you will join me. I think next week I have another one. So please feel free to reach out to me. Stay safe and enjoy your well-deserved time off.
Thank you.
Thank you.